Welcome to my channel Forever Celeb.
For more than 3 decades, Alan Jackson stood beneath the brightest lights in country music and never seemed to be chasing fame. White cowboy hat, unmistakable southern voice, quiet presence, he sang about small towns, broken hearts, family, faith, and the ordinary moments that make a life worth remembering. Then came the diagnosis he had been carrying privately for years, and the farewell tour that made everyone understand what they had been watching all along. Alan Eugene Jackson was born on October 17, 1958, in Newnan, Georgia. He grew up in a modest home with his parents and 4 older sisters. No industry connections. No carefully designed path to Nashville. What the family had was faith, hard work, and music, gospel songs in church and classic country voices through radios and record players. His early years were far from the glamorous image of a country superstar. After leaving school, he worked ordinary jobs. He wasn't raised among music executives or professional songwriters. He was a young Southern man who understood manual labor, financial pressure, family responsibility, and the quiet pride of people who rarely complained about difficult circumstances. Those weren't background details, they were the emotional foundation of every song he would eventually write. He didn't have to imagine the world he sang about. He had lived in it. One of the most important people in his story was Denise Jackson, his high school sweetheart. They married in 1979, years before fame entered their lives. Denise reportedly played a crucial role in helping Alan secure an important early break after meeting country star Glenn Campbell while working as a flight attendant. That connection helped Jackson move closer to Nashville, but it guaranteed nothing. He still had to prove that his traditional sound could survive in a business constantly searching for something new. He arrived in Nashville carrying songs, ambition, and a style rooted in country music's past. He worked in the mail room at the Nashville network while continuing to write and pursue a recording contract. Rejection followed him, as it follows nearly every unknown singer who lands in Music City. But Jackson had something that couldn't easily be manufactured: authenticity. His accent, his values, his reserved personality, none of it was constructed. It came from the life he had actually known. When his breakthrough arrived, it didn't transform him into a flashy celebrity. It allowed him to bring traditional country music to a new generation. Here in the real world, chasing that neon rainbow, don't rock the jukebox, Chattahoochee, they established him as both a gifted songwriter and a distinctive performer. While other artists incorporated increasing amounts of pop and rock, Jackson stayed committed to steel guitars, fiddles, honky-tonk rhythms, and direct storytelling. That dedication earned him a multi-platinum, award-winning career and eventual induction into the Country Music Hall of Fame. Success brought pressures audiences couldn't see. Constant touring meant long absences from home. Fame complicated his marriage in ways that placed his family under scrutiny. He and Denise separated during the 1990s before rebuilding their relationship. A reconciliation that became one of the most important chapters in both their lives, though it didn't erase the pain that preceded it. Behind the songs celebrating lasting love was a family that had learned exactly how fragile love becomes when neglected. Then came September 11, 2001. Jackson wrote "Where Were You, When the World Stopped Turning," a song that captured what millions of Americans were struggling to express without needing to manufacture grand political answers. He simply asked human questions and let the honesty do the work. It became one of the most significant performances of his career precisely because it didn't try to be. In September 2021, Jackson revealed what he had been carrying privately for years. He had been diagnosed with Charcot-Marie-Tooth disease, commonly known as CMT, a hereditary neurological condition that causes peripheral nerve deterioration, gradually weakening muscles and interfering with balance and coordination. It was not a sudden injury that would heal with time. It was progressive, and Jackson admitted that remaining on stage had become increasingly difficult. For fans who had always seen him standing calmly at the microphone, the revelation reframed everything. The stillness that had always seemed like effortless confidence now carried another meaning. The careful steps, the deliberate movements, those had been a private physical battle the whole time. Jackson explained that the disease had been inherited through his family and had already affected other members. He was clear that CMT was not fatal in itself but that it was disabling and progressive. He wasn't announcing the end of his life. He was admitting that the life he had known on the road could not continue forever. In 2022, he launched The Last Call, One More for the Road tour, a title that sounded both celebratory and painfully final. Each concert became more than a greatest hits set. It was a public farewell between an artist and an audience that had grown older alongside him. Fans arrived wearing vintage tour shirts and cowboy hats with expressions that showed they understood the significance. Many had first heard Jackson as teenagers. Some had played his songs at their weddings. Others had used them to grieve people they had lost. When familiar songs filled the arena, the audience often sang louder than the man on stage. As though trying to carry him through the performance, returning the strength his music had once given them. Jackson sometimes appeared unsteady, but he remained composed. He didn't turn his struggle into a theatrical display. There were no long speeches designed to manipulate emotion. His sadness was visible precisely because he tried so hard to contain it, and that restraint had always been central to his appeal. Alan Jackson belonged to a tradition in which pain was rarely announced with grand gestures. It was placed inside a song, hidden beneath a melody, delivered in a voice steady enough to keep the listener present. Chattahoochee, once a celebration of youth and summer freedom, became a reminder of how quickly both disappear. Remember When, always a song about the full arc of a marriage, became almost unbearable for audiences who had followed Jackson from the beginning. He was no longer imagining old age from a distance. He was standing inside it. Leaving touring was not only about surrendering concerts. The road had shaped the rhythm of his adult life for over 30 years. Buses, arenas, rehearsals, sound checks, hotel rooms, the familiar architecture of movement. To stop meant confronting a question many aging performers fear: who are you when the applause fades and the schedule disappears? His songs had always celebrated ordinary life, but Alan Jackson hadn't lived an ordinary schedule for decades. Stepping away required him to accept that permanence was an illusion. A career could be preserved through recordings and memories, but the body that created those moments could not remain unchanged. Away from the stage, he turned increasingly toward home. Denise remained central to that world. Their marriage had survived extraordinary pressure, fame, separation, her own battle with cancer, and the daily cost of a career that kept him absent. When illness entered their lives as a shared condition rather than an external threat, the vows they had made as young people from Georgia gained a new and more demanding weight. The man who had spent much of the year traveling now faced the possibility of increasing dependence on the woman who had known him before the awards, before the arenas, before the world recognized his voice. Their daughters had grown up witnessing both the public and the private man. To the world, he was a Hall of Fame artist whose songs had defined a generation. To them, he was their father, imperfections included. And the arrival of grandchildren brought a different kind of light into the same period. A new generation entering the family just as one chapter was closing. Time takes and time gives simultaneously, a truth Jackson had written about throughout his career without fully knowing how personally it would eventually arrive. Jackson's contribution to country music was never about reinvention. He had demonstrated that commercial success didn't require abandoning tradition, and that consistency rooted in conviction could outlast nearly every trend that tried to make it obsolete. Other artists would carry the tradition forward, but no one could reproduce his exact combination of humility, directness, melody, and lived experience. His physical limitations didn't diminish the concerts. In some ways, they stripped them to their emotional core. Everything unnecessary fell away. What remained was an artist, an audience, and a shared collection of memories. Fans didn't need him to move quickly across the stage. They didn't need spectacle or the illusion of unchanged youth. They needed the voice, the songs, and the presence of the man who had written them. Many artists never received the closure Jackson's farewell offered. Careers end quietly or suddenly, without the chance for a final exchange. His audiences were given something more, the opportunity to stand in an arena and express what his music had meant while he could still hear it. A song released decades ago could remind one person of a first love and another of a parent who died. The details were different, but the emotion was shared. Jackson had created the soundtrack, the audience had supplied the lives. That relationship was why his physical struggle affected people so deeply. His aging reflected theirs. His farewell reminded them of younger versions of themselves that survived only in memory. When the final stage light eventually dims on Alan Jackson's performing career, what he leaves behind is more durable than any tour. He gave people a way to remember who they had been. And that gift, a voice that became part of millions of lives, placed inside songs capable of outliving the stages on which they were first heard, cannot be taken by a diagnosis, reversed by a progressive condition, or dimmed by the passage of time. The boy from Noonan, Georgia arrived in Nashville without guarantees. He became one of the most successful and respected country artists of his generation by refusing to pretend he was something he wasn't. And when the road finally became too difficult to travel, he found that everything that had mattered most was already waiting at home.